But I always found that it was the people that were addicted to drugs that never made it. And that's been a constant in my life. The guys that do drugs that were addicted to it, the people around them, they're losers. And they're too weak to stay off it. And I have a very conservative attitude and a very negative attitude towards drug users and drugs because of how I was raised. So I hate to get into those fucking arguments about should we legalize this? No. Put all those fucking people on an island that want to use dope and let them use dope, but keep them away from the new generation of kids, because the new generation of kids think everything is okay, and it's not. It ruins family. It ruined my family.
Okay, so for the audience, I'm coming to the end of my Southern California tour, and I have a very interesting guest today. He was recommended by Mike Cheveria, who is, I don't know at this point whether you'll have listened or watched that episode, because I'm going to do a two-parter with him and his brother. But regardless, I was fortunate enough to come in contact with my next guest, and we're going to talk about what he did, which I think is very interesting. So, with that being said, can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Hi, my name's Steve Duncan.
Steve, and who did you work for?
I was a probation officer with the County of San Diego for 12 years. And in 1996, I switched careers and I went over to the California Department of Justice Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement as special agent.
Okay. And can you give me a little bit of background about growing up? Where'd you grow up, family life? And during that time, was there something that drew you to law enforcement?
Yeah, yes, definitely. I was born in South Dakota. My dad was a farmer. And when he was in the Navy, he met my mom in New York City. And they ended up getting married. My dad brought my mom, a New York girl, back to the farm. She didn't like it. And after the third kid, which was me, they moved us to San Diego. My dad had spent some time here in the Navy, and he had applied for the San Diego Police Department. So my dad actually got the job out here. Farming was very tough, very stressful. And so he got a job as a police officer in San Diego in 1957.
Oh,
And he worked his way up to being a homicide detective. And in 1969, he had an aneurysm at the age of 41 and passed away.
wow.
So it kind of left us. There were five kids, had two younger brothers, two older sisters. There were five of us, and my mother was a New York girl, didn't have a lot of parenting skills, wasn't structured enough to keep us in line. I had two older sisters that brought a lot of the dregs of society into our home. They were teenagers. And my mother, there was drugs and there's sex and all kinds of crap that me and my little brothers were exposed to. And I was fighting a lot with my mother and my sisters to try to keep that element out of our house. I didn't like it.
How old were you when that was going on?
12,
Okay.
11 and 12.
Wow.
Yeah, so my dad, we went from a very structured family. My dad was strict, and we didn't step out of line. We all went to a Catholic school. If we were bad, we got punished, which I think is good. And then that all went to shit once my dad did. So my house, everybody kind of did a 180. I started to, with all that freedom, but I was so much into school and sports, and I don't know. There's something about me that I didn't like. Those people my sisters were bringing home, they were all the people you could see in the movies back in those days. That the anti-drug movies that they used to show us in grammar school. Those fucking hippies eating paint because they were stoned, and and you see all these and that's one of the things that really did. I don't want to be a douchebag. I don't want to be like those fucking losers that my sisters used to bring. And that's exactly it. Every one of them was the same. And I remember, as I aged, I remember looking at these guys coming in and just fucking laughing at them. It's just like, out of the same mold. You're a fucking loser. And so early on, my attitude towards drugs and druggies were they're fucking losers, you know? And no matter what you smoked or put in your body, you were fucking losers. And I had, firsthand knowledge of that because, these guys my sisters were bringing home were stealing our clothes, eating all our food, smoking constantly, all that, nobody went to school anymore. And so when I was 12, my mother moved us from San Diego to New York City because she had her extended family there.
Okay, well, before you go on to New York, do you think that was that a residual, that whole attitude that you had as 12 years old? Do you think that was a residual of your dad?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was life with my dad and life with my mom.
Okay.
And it went from strict, which I needed that. I think every kid does, to no rules. And a mother that turned her head, that didn't want to face what was going on. She didn't have the capability. My mom's strong. She just passed. She was 95 years old. She was a strong person physically. She provided for us financially as best she could. But all that other stuff we didn't have. So we had to find it in other places if we wanted to succeed.
Okay.
And so when I was 12, we moved to the Bronx. My mother's extended family was there. So I went from this beauty to the shithole Bronx. And, when I was a California kid, I was 12. I was in the 8th grade when I came over. Bleached blonde hair, curly accent. And so, those kids kind of abused me. Some of the meaner kids, they kind of abused me because of my accent, my drawl, and my laid back attitude, saying hi to everybody. It's kind of like they just want to slap me in the head. But I adjusted. It took some time, but I adjusted and found some very good friends in New York. It was just a different way of life. It was so much faster and you're so compacted with people, and the grammar school I went to in San Diego had 40 kids in the class, one class, and then the grammar school I went to in New York, even though it was Catholic, there were 4 or 5 classes. So you went from somebody on the sports teams to not being on a team or being on like the minor leagues of the varsity at school, and so that does a lot to your ego. Because I was always one of the standout athletes in San Diego. But when I went to New York, kids were so much better than me, especially basketball, so, and I was tiny, I was a tiny kid. So, but I found the right friends to hang out with in New York. I didn't want to go to public school because there was absolutely no structure that kids could do whatever they want. And I didn't want to be in one of those environments, because I had it at home. So my uncle Izzy, got me into a Catholic school. It was like, 5 miles away. So I took a bus every day to school, but it was a lot better than the alternative. And so in grammar school in the 8th grade, my teacher, Tom Stewart, saw that I was having trouble adjusting to the curriculum because it was so much more competitive than it was in San Diego. Saw that I was adjusting to the amount of kids in school, and physically I got pneumonia my first year there, and then my sisters continued to do in New York what they did in San Diego. And so my house was a drug haven. It was a haven for douchebags that stole your clothes, ate your food, smoked in your house, had sex in the next room. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that my sisters would expose me to that. Even as they got older, they kept up with it. And my entire life has been dealing with that, dealing with the fact that they didn't do what was best for our family. Because I had a little brother that died of heroin overdose and another little brother that was addicted for a great portion of his life, so they exposed us to that. And I was the middle child and I fought with my sisters. I fought with their boyfriends. I got my ass kicked. I'd come home from school and they're, same old douchebags in the house, and I'd grab a baseball bat, chase them out, and and got beat up a lot of the time. My mother didn't deal with it. So I was quite the Hitler at my home. I just threw anything that was close to me at my sister's. And I was seen as the problem. So I would get the visit from my aunt, my uncles, my mom's brothers. I would get the visits from them and saying, hey, you can't be doing this. You need to be nice to your mom. And I would explain to them what I was going through. And by the time I explained to them, they were on my side.
Yeah.
And so I went through that as a kid, but there was always somebody in my grammar school, Tom Stewart, and then he walked me over to the high school down the street, St. Raymond's High School. And so I applied there and was accepted there. And Tom Stewart went over to teach at the high school, kept an eye on me. I was failing miserably in my freshman year because I just wasn't doing the work. And he and another teacher took me under their wing, the vice principal actually, and he was coach of the baseball team. And he was always in our area scouting for talent because, Throgs Neck in the Bronx, that's where all the baseball players were. And so I met the vice principal, and he made a deal with me after my freshman year. I'll talk to the 2 subjects that you're going to fail. I'll talk to the teachers, but you're going to work for me this summer at the day camp that I have upstate New York. And I'll pay you $25 a week, but you're going to work for me. And next year you're going to be on my baseball team and you're going to do better. So that summer I worked for Mr. Patnash, our vice principal at St. Raymond's. He was also the head baseball coach, and worked for him. Was able to buy my own clothes the next year because we didn't have any money. So I would always have to wear the same thing every day, and as a kid, that's embarrassing, and kids point that out all the time. So I was able to buy my own clothes and I felt so much better about myself. And then, but I returned to that environment. I had very good friends, but, leaving the house, which was a, douchebag haven, and going out to see my friends, it was great that I had them.
Yeah.
It was great that I had those teachers that helped me, even though sometimes I didn't want their help. So once my dad died, I didn't want any more men in my life.
Yeah.
He was my dad.
Yeah.
And I kind of pushed away from the people that got too close. But I always had them, and my friends had really good families, and they're my friends to this day. Back in the Bronx, or they all live someplace better now, but in the area.
Yeah.
And so those are the guys that raised me. Those are the guys that continued to teach me structure and what was right and wrong, because we all had that same core, that value. We all broke away from the main crowd of about 60 guys in the Bronx, and we would go camping on the weekends once we were old enough to drive. We would do things that took us away from the larger element, which was there was a lot of drug use and stuff like that. And then I got a job at McDonald's when I was 16, and that changed my life. I was exposed to a new group of people, new friends from different areas of the Bronx, and I started doing great in school. My average of my 75 average went up to 85. Or my 70 average went up to 85 or 90 sometimes. I was doing well. I'm not the smartest kid. I mean, I've taken all the IQ tests. I'm slightly above average, but that just studying and taking pride in my work and at school, and
So what brings you back to California? What begins your probation career?
yeah, that's the story. Yeah. So, nothing changed at my house. Always the drugs. My little brothers were experimenting. I was trying to guide them along. I was trying to keep, trying to keep the structure in the home. I was trying to keep some kind of sanity in the home, but I hated my sister's boyfriends. I didn't like living with my mother because she brought the same element to the home. She wasn't a good judgment of people. She accepted everybody, basically. And so a lot of her friends were fucked up people, and some of them took opportunities to, abuse my little brothers. I never caught anybody red-handed, but if I did, I would have killed them. But they were just those type of predatory people. And so I just didn't want to be a part of that. But that was such a part of my life. So after 2 years of college, I went to St. John's University. After 2 years of college, I was 19, and I just couldn't take it there anymore. And I had an opportunity to get a job in San Diego as a roofer. So one of my childhood friends had a roofing company. His dad did. So, and one of my old girlfriends, my wife's cousin, who I still keep in touch with, she told me that I could live with her because we kept in touch. We used to write letters back in those days. Remember that? Pen pals. Yeah. So we kept in touch. And when I remember coming back here when I was 14 or 15, just for a vacation. I was staying with my mom's friend, and I reconnected with my childhood sweetheart. And so when I was 19, she said, you could live with me or you could live with my parents. I adored her parents. Her dad was my coach in grammar school, and her mom was one of the ladies that always helped out functions at St. Patrick's, the school I went to here. And I adored them. And Lisa was a little bit more of a free spirit, and I didn't want, again, I made the choice to stay with her parents because I wanted peace.
Yeah.
I wanted, structure, or some, and they didn't. So I went to New York with $171 in my pocket. My best friend, Johnny Sacco, drove me to the airport. I cried to myself as I left him and walked onto the plane because I was leaving everybody, and I came here. I moved in with the Boxes, and that's my wife of 40 years. That's her aunt and uncle. And that's how I met my wife. But I moved in with them. I stayed with them for about 7 months till I got enough money to get my own apartment. And I didn't have a car. They got me involved in coaching, girls softball, Little League. And so I was working as a roofer, coaching, and then going to college at night. And I did that for many years. After about 5 years of working construction, it didn't mesh with going to school. I didn't have a car, so I was taking the bus I was riding my bike to work, begging the guys to drop me off on the side of the freeway close to my apartment, going to practice on my bike, and then going to school on the bus at night, and drinking coffee all the time, And then on the way home from school, the transportation system in San Diego sucks, still does. And so I would hitchhike home, and I'd get picked up by all kinds of characters, wanting to have their way with me, but that was my life for a while. And then I finally got a car and, freedom, and, I had time to do things. And, but it took me a long time to finish college. It took me 14 years to finish college after I had 2 years by 19 years old, but, and I lived day to day, as a roofer. So sometimes we couldn't work because it rained. It doesn't rain much here, but, after about 4 years of doing that roofing, and that was really hard work. I mean, I did the hot tar, so after 4 years of that, I got a job doing drywall and ceilings, and I worked at all the malls in Southern California, but that was extremely stressful because I was driving to LA every day with a scaffolding on my compact car, and coaching and going to school and trying to have a social life. I think the only girls I ended up were hookers, because I'd go to the bars with my friends, and I was so shy that it was always the promiscuous girls that would pick me up, take me home, stuff like that. So I had very little social life, never anything lasting. But when I was a kid, I loved the fact that my dad was a cop. I loved the fact that he was a cop. Every time I'm sharing at school, I would show pictures of him and gunfights and stuff like that. I remember a teacher taking me aside saying, maybe you should bring in a rock or, a furry object to share, and no more newspaper articles, because, my dad was a badass, and And then when I went to New York, I changed my focus on law enforcement. I either wanted to be a forest ranger because I love to go camping with my buddies, or a probation officer. I want to help them. You know. And so I was a criminal justice administration major at St. John's in San Diego State. Finally got my degree, but after 5 years of construction, I saw that construction and education didn't mesh, so I got a job in a bank. There was this girl that liked me, so she hired me to work for Bank of America, and I was terrible at it. Could never balance. And I'm smart. I'm good at math, but I wasn't good with the calculators and all that kind of stuff that they had. And so they promoted me because I was such a terrible bank teller. They promoted me to security. Those rejected returned items, but safe deposit box. So, I would let customers in there, and I saw all kinds of shit when I was doing that. Guys with stacks of bills in there that drug traffickers. And every time we got robbed, I missed it, and I was always pissed off because I would have my head up my ass somewhere, And but I did that, and it allowed me to get a lot of my schoolwork done, and it allowed me more time to apply for jobs. And so one of my partners at the bank said, "Hey, Steve, I got this at the gym today. And it's exactly what you want to do." It was a probation officer. And so I applied and was hired. And then 2 weeks later, I was fired. So I called personnel. I had put in my notice at the bank. They had a party for me. Victoria was 9 months pregnant, with my daughter. And I was just crushed. And I go, "Why am I getting fired?" And I go, "Well," the personnel lady goes, "Well, Steve, we did a background on you, and you have 1 million speeding tickets, and you let them go to warrant, and then you were driving under the influence, And I go, "Well, yeah, that was reduced. That was, that was a small amount, Well, you have this, and so we're firing you." I go, "Is there any way I can appeal this or talk to somebody?" And she goes, "Well, you can talk to the 2 deputy chiefs, and we'll set up a meeting." So they set it up for like a week later. And I'm just dying, dying. And so you have the meeting. One of the deputy chiefs doesn't show up, and the other chief says, "She's not going to hire you, Steve. You're going to have to talk to me." And so she was the chief of juvenile institutions. Her name was Barbara Frank, another angel in my life. And I talked to her. I go, "Listen, since I was 19, I've been living, on my own in San Diego. And so I worked every day, coached, went to college, little time for socializing, and made stupid decisions, I couldn't go to court, because I had to be in LA in a job, I didn't have anybody to tell me. I mean, I remember going to an interview with the San Diego PD. The guys dropped me off in my roofing outfit with tar on it to go to my interview with the chief. It was like I scored number 1 on the test. And I'm 21 years old, and here I am in my roofing outfit talking to the chief. And he's asking me about my roommate because my roommate smoked dope. And I go, "Yeah, he smokes dope, and I don't do that, but it's a bad choice for me, I ended up making better choices, but I never had that guy to tell me, "Hey, wear a suit, dude, dumb fuck, wear a suit, and never had that opportunity." And I remember telling my mom, she goes, "Oh, it's because you're white." I go, and I go, I don't think so, and then later, years later, I realized that it's because my roommate was smoking dope all the time, and I was living there, and that didn't show well. My previous history, just traffic tickets, and the fact that I showed up in a roofer's uniform, and but they didn't realize where I was coming from. But Barbara Frank did. She goes, "I have a son your age," and he took him a while to figure things out. But I see that your heart is good and that you want to go in the right direction, and I'm gonna I'm going to give you a chance. You're going to work in juvenile hall, though, the fishbowl, and I'm going to watch you very closely. And so she hired me, and it was just like, from that point on, it was just like my life changed. I was getting paid well. I loved my job. I never had a job that I loved except for McDonald's when I was 16, because I met a lot of girls, and it's fun. You meet a lot of people. And so now, I was working in probation juvenile hall, and I was first one into a fight, first one, to catch somebody that escaped, first one to cut somebody down when they were hanging themselves, and I was good. I confronted people. I had the respect of my peers. And I rose. I advanced probation. So when they picked a gang suppression team and probation, probation officers that could think intrusively, that were confrontational, but fair. I was picked to be one of the officers on this gang suppression team, and so they taught us how to shoot. They put us through a mini academy, contact and cover. It was just 2 or 3 weeks, but it was pretty intense. And then we picked the 50th of the worst probationers, most dangerous probationers, to work, and our goal was to supervise them intrusively. If they violated their probation, write a report, take them back before the judge, and most of the time recommend prison. I always recommended prison for the most part because these guys were badasses. There were always a couple that were salvageable, that I had maybe misjudged them, or somebody had given me their case because they said he was a badass, and he really wasn't. He was a follower. And just the fact that you were on his ass every day, going to his home, banging on his door, waking him up, urine testing him, forcing him to making him get a job, just being on their ass so often. Some of those kids needed it. And so they succeeded. Some for a while and some forever, but I always found that it was the people that were addicted to drugs that never made it, and that's been a constant in my life. The guys that do drugs, that were addicted to it, people around them, they're losers, and they're too weak to stay off it. And I have a very conservative attitude and a very negative attitude towards drug users and drugs because of how I was raised. So I hate to get into those fucking arguments about should we legalize this? No, put all those fucking people on an island that want to use dope and let them use dope, but keep them away from the new generation of kids, because the new generation of kids think everything is okay, and it's not. It ruins family. It ruined my family. And you, as a DEA agent, and me as an agent, we'd go into those houses and we would see families, parents devoted to that needle, or devoted to that snort, or that methamphetamine, heroin, or whatever, and their kids just are neglected. And you have to leave the mom there with the kid because somebody has to watch him, and you don't want to put him in the system. So we still saw that over and over again, and that embeds in your mind, that solidifies that attitude that you just hate these fucking people. And I do, and I still do to this day, but Barbara Frank gave me the chance, and I advanced in probation. And then when Michelle Linhart, and Julius Beretta, when they needed a throw down probation officer to go to DEA so that he could cover their asses on those probation searches, I was the guy. And so they cross-deputized me as a DEA agent, or to enforce the Title 21 statutes, the drug laws.
Yeah.
And I took advantage of that. I started doing undercover buys. I had a lot of informants because I was a probation officer. And all I had to do was do a probation search and give the guy a choice. You help me out, or you go to prison.
Were you doing undercover as a probation officer?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me this: with
Yeah.
all your background of the family life and everything else, how was it going undercover?
I could play the part, but I'm Caucasian. I mean, anybody could buy dope, right?
That's exactly right.
Anybody could buy dope.
Yep.
You don't have to be scraggly looking or anything like that. But, I was more of a case maker. I was more of a guy that knew how to write well. And right away, I met a guy who to this day is the case agent of Operation Landa. His first day on the job, I remember his name's Steve Paris. And Steve asked me, Steve, I just got out of the academy. I need an informant. Can you help me? I go, yeah. You know what I do every day, Steve? I go to the box. I go to the mailbox and I check in all the anonymous tips. And I go through them and I take the good ones and I leave the rest there. And so Steve and I, we get this letter from this guy named Will Weed, right? He's a Crip. And he goes, I'm in jail. I have a case right now. And I wanna help out. My wife is a cocaine queen of San Diego. She buys kilos up in LA. She brings them down here, rocks them up, and she's pretty and she can sell them to anybody. And she'll park her car uptown San Diego and she'll walk down to a hotel downtown. And she has a bunch of guys selling for her out of the hotel room. You will never see her out there selling, but she has kids, she has adults. And she's on probation. So I look her up, she's on probation, 2 felony probations for selling crack cocaine. At the time, this is 1992, we had that cocaine, that rock cocaine.
Yeah.
So your third strike is life in prison.
Yeah.
If you get, that 100 ounces of 100% pure, right? So I look up Tega. Her name was Tega Johnson. She's on probation. So Steve and I go to her house. We follow her around. We confirm that what this guy is saying in the letter. We go to the jail to talk to him. We tell him we can't talk about your case, but we were both pretty naive at the time because the DA had a fucking fit. But anyways, we go to Tega's house. She's living in Section 8 housing in a nice part of San Diego. We go to her house. We find 4 ounces of rock cocaine or 6 ounces of rock cocaine in the microwave oven. She microwaved it. And she was the biggest bitch in the world while we were doing the probation search. And once we found the crack, she says, what can I do for you guys? And it was like, she was one of the best informants I've ever had. And I've had some great ones. But she ended up cooperating with us. Steve Paris was the lead agent on the case. I was helping him. I was a probation officer. I didn't feel real comfortable taking the lead on a lot of things. So my first year or so, I just ended up being that guy that did surveillance, that wrote the surveillance reports and stuff like that. And I was taught by the best because I always associated with the best, the guys that were the workers,
Yeah.
And so Steve took the lead on the case, and we ended up buying dope from every major black gang member in San Diego and some Hispanic. But at the time, the cocaine was controlled by the black street gangs. However, when we ended up doing our sweep at the end of the case, the sources were always Mexicans. You talk to the street gang members, and it was always this Joe Blow Mexican guy that really didn't have a criminal history. He lived around the corner and low key. So. But that was a big case because we put a camera in Tega's car. We had the FBI install it because our DEA tech ops at the time wasn't very good. So we had the FBI install it, and it was a radio speaker, shining down or reflecting down on the passenger seat. And so we would bring Tega in. We would go in the boss's office. Our boss was Charles Howard. I don't know if you know Charles. Charles was a great dude. And we would go in Charles's office, get on the landline, and we would tell her who to call. Call this guy. He tried to kill a cop last year. Call him and see if you can buy dope from him. So we were directing on her as who to call. We were getting the biggest targets we could, and she would meet them. We would do a surveillance, and she would meet them at a mall, parking lot, and she would videotape. We would buy 6 ounces, okay, because we need 100%, 100 grams of 100% pure. So we structured the case in order to lock these guys into the 10 years minimum mandatories.
Yeah.
And most of these guys had priors. So a lot of them were looking at life at the end. And so we did that case, Operation Rainbow, Steve and I. And Steve was so good with the informant. I mean, I was older than Steve. I liked to sleep at night. Steve be up all night, getting ready for the next day. He did the heavy lifting, and I was his partner.
Yeah.
But during that time, it's when Jack Robertson walked into the room. He was in Michelle Linhart's group, cross group one, Group 1 with DEA, and they did the major Mexican drug trafficking organizations. And Jack had the Tijuana Cartel, the Ariano Felix brothers. I had never heard of them, never heard of them. So in 1993, he comes across the hallway, because literally right across the hallway into our Team 5, we were a gang group. And he goes, I hear you know a lot about the Logan Heights gang. I go, yeah, that's my area code. That's where that's I know the guys, and I had them in camp too, so I know them all. He goes, well, they're being recruited by these brothers to act as enforcers for the Ariano Felix cartel, who just went to war with this guy named Chapo Guzman. And I go, oh, okay. Never heard of Chapo Guzman. This is early 1993. And he goes, Steve, I got this. One of the informants, one of the gang members that was working for the cartel got shot in San Diego. Got shot 7 times. And he's at the hospital. And his own guys killed him because he was talking too much. So it was a hit crew from Tijuana that came up here. And their boss went to pay his mom for the funeral bill, just as a classy act, I guess. And she told him, God bless, he survived. He's still alive. He's at the hospital. My informant told me this. And this informant's in jail in MCC right now. This is back in 92, 93. And my informant told me this, and they're going to the hospital to finish him off. And we got to beat him. It was like, cool, It was like, this is cool. I like this guy, So we go to the hospital. At the time, my buddy at the gang unit, San Diego PD, was babysitting him at the hospital. He had told me that he had got hit in a drive-by. And I go, I know exactly where he is, Jack. Let's go. So we go, we meet up with James Francis Hergenroth, or Hergie, his gang detective, and he's babysitting Cracks. This guy's name is Jose Luis Cruz, Cracks from Logan Heights Red Steps. I knew them all. And so I walk in with Jack. Cracks sees me and he smiles as well. He smiles because he's missing his right eye, and they just took the trach out, and he's, got bags all over him. And Jack walks up to him and he goes, so what happened? And Cracks goes, oh, we got hit by a drive-by shooting. And Jack goes, no, you didn't, dude. You work for the Ariano Felix organization. You're a hitman for them. And you talk too much, so they came to get you, didn't they? And he starts spitting up his medicine, and shaking. And he goes, well, if you know that I can't talk to you, And so we go back. He went talk to Jack. We go back. Hergie goes to take a piss later that night. Cracks unplugs himself and leaves the hospital, And so that was one of my first encounters with Jack. And the second one was, and then at that time he goes, the second time was they were going to do a hit on this guy named Gordo in San Diego. Jack comes in the room and goes, Steve, my informant just told me that Gordo's going to be killed by the Arianos. And because, he did something to piss him off. So I go, well, his name's David Maldonado. Let's go. So we go to his mom's house. We try to prevent this from happening. At the time, Jack had given me an informant that was a gang member, but the informant was terrible because he used PCP all the time. But he did know about this. So I call him and I go, tell me about this hit. He goes, well, they're going to meet at the hotel in National City. They're going to stage there, and then they're going to go to the guy's house in Logan Heights. We didn't know where the house was, but we were able to send a group, a special team from the San Diego Police Department, Special Enforcement Division, to the hotel where they picked up the hitman briefing. And they followed him. They get on the freeway. They try to light him up, and they get off. In Logan Heights, the hit team, they go the wrong way down a one-way street. They crash into a tree, and all 4 guys bail. And so we get 2 of the guys. We get one right away, Dopey, and then Melvin, who's still in prison in Mexico right now, goes under a home, and we do we rope off a radius, and we end up getting him a few hours later. But 2 of the guys get away, But anyways, that's my second encounter with Jack. It's good shit, And everybody loves it when I get on the radio, now because I have the radio to the PD, and everybody loves me because they, I get into trouble, And so, and Jack goes, Steve, good job. we worked well together. Jack and I became really good friends. And Jack's just a great person. He gives everybody credit for everything good that happens, and everything he touches turns to gold. He's one of those guys. And so he goes, you know what? I need your help in this case. I go, well, I'm helping Steve with, Operation Rainbow and we're ready to take it down. And I go, yeah, well, all these gangsters. And I want to put you in charge of working the gangsters. And I'm going to give you a couple of informants. And you're going to use those guys to buy dope or any way you can to get them to cooperate to find out what's going on down there. Because there's a shitload of gang members doing hits. They're looking for Chapo, Guzman, Miles Zambada, Obama. They're going to LA, San Diego, Florida. They're going to Mexico. They're doing hits on these guys. They're getting paid $25,000 for these hits. I need to find out more about them. Can you help me? And I go, yeah, as much as I can, Jack. Well, then the Cardinal thing happened. And Jack had already given me that, right?
So can you explain that a little bit? So Larry Robertson, his interview talks about that, but can you?
Yeah, I know Larry was a part of rounding people up.
Yeah, so can you talk about the Cardinal thing?
Yeah. So in 1993, in April of 1993, and by this time the Arianos are at war with Chapo, the Sinaloa guys. There was a time when they were all friends, when they all pooled their resources to buy Colombian cocaine and bring it through San Diego and other places. There was a federation, there was a group, they worked together. But there was a personal beef between the Arellano brothers and Chapo Guzman's guy, Rayo Lopez. Rayo Lopez, back in the old day, down at the ranch in Sinaloa, robbed their sister. And there's a term in Spanish that means they stole her from the ranch when she was 15 or whatever. Stole one of their sisters, an Adina, and brought her and took her away and raped her. That's the way they viewed it. And Adina didn't want to go, but he took her. Guy's name was Rayo Lopez. He was very close to Chapo Guzman, and his family was very high up there on the food chains with drug traffickers at the time. The Arellanos were just workers at the time. Their dad sold black market stuff, cigarettes, alcohol, stuff like that. So they couldn't really do anything about it at the time. But Ramon swore, Benjamin swore, I'm going to fucking kill that guy one day. And so 5-6 years later, they're celebrating Miles Zambada's birthday in Tijuana. They're all from Sinaloa, but the Arellanos are now established in Tijuana. They've established themselves there. They're the top drug dealers there. Through process of elimination, drug traffickers get killed, they get arrested, so they end up on top in TJ, but they're still friends with Miles Zambada, baptizing each other's kids, still working with Chapo. Chapo's not as high as Miles Zambada or Amado Carrillo at the time. At the time it was Amado Carrillo, Miles Zambada, Obama, the Arellano Felix brothers, Miguel Carl Pitero, Rafael Guajardo from the Juarez Cartel, all pooling their resources, corrupting government officials, paying off every level of the government, getting free passage to the ports and then smuggling it across. So they were making billions of dollars. But that beef. So Miles Zambada is having a birthday party at Club Britannia in Tijuana, 1989. It's New Year's Eve, 1989. And so they're having a party there. All the Arellano brothers are there. Miles Zambada's there. They're all drunk. And one of the workers comes in. It says to Ramon, Rayo Lopez is outside. He wants to speak with Michael, or he's looking for somebody. So Benjamin looks at Benjamin, and Benjamin just nods. Ramon goes outside, gets in the car with Rayo, just executes him. We have a witness that was in the vehicle right behind. Boom. Start driving off. Boom, 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 boom. They dump the body. They pay off the cops to slide it under the stack. And Chapo's pissed because that was his compadre. That was his worker. He takes it personally. So Chapo gets revenge. The Arellanos get revenge. There's meetings that take place over a period of years to try to squelch, this feud. There's meetings in Sinaloa, meetings in Mexico City. Mayo Zambada is the mediator. Everybody shows up with 20 bodyguards, and then Chapo tries to kill the Arellanos at Christine's discotheque in November of 1992. The Arianos leave town because there's a Sinaloa cartel general in town. There's somebody favorable to Chapo in the Tijuana Plaza. So they all go on vacation in Puerto Vallarta. Chapo finds out they're going to a club, Christine nightclub, Puerto Vallarta, and he storms it. He dresses guys up, as cops, pays the real cops to go have a meeting somewhere, and they ambush the Arianos. But at the time, the Arianos were in the bathroom having their own little party. And they have a Logan Heights gang member there with them, David Barone. David Barone he's a one percenter. He was this guy in San Diego that we were chasing for years. He was a badass. And whenever he was out of prison, the murder rate went up, drug sales went up. He was a very violent person, but ambitious. So anyways, David's there. And he ends up being heroic and saving the Arianos, getting him out of the bathroom light onto the roof, and then shooting somebody on the perimeter and getting them to their safety. So it was very historic. In drug trafficking, there's Kiki Camarena.
Yeah.
That changed things. Then there was Christine's. That changed things. Then there was the murder of the Cardinal. That changed things. Those three events in the case that I worked are the biggest events ever, Yeah. And then recently, Chapo getting convicted and Genaro Garcia Luna getting convicted of corruption. But I'm going off track. But after the Christines things, the Arianos went to David Barone. Ben Hameen met with David Barone in his van, and he said, David, I'm obviously at war with Chapo, and Mayo's not taking my calls anymore, so I think it's basically us against the world, and I need guys like you. And I gave him like $500,000. He goes, you buy some safe houses, recruit some guys. So he sends his brother-in-law over to San Diego, talks to the gangsters, and he takes the worst of the worst down south. They go down south, they go to the taxis, they get put in a car, they're blindfolded or bag put over their head. They're taken to one of four houses. They're either with Ramon, Benjamin, or these three safe houses stocked with enforcers. They're given weapons of all types, armor, police uniforms. They're regularly trained to shoot these weapons tactfully, and they have radios, and they patrol the streets every day with the Arianos. At the range, they find these 3 or 4 guys that are really good with the gun, and they train them. They spend more time, and they send them on missions in Mexico and San Diego and LA to kill anybody associated with the Mato Carrillo, Mayo Zambada, Chapo Guzman, Huero Palma, So these guys are going on these missions, and they're killing a lot of people, and they're getting paid $15,000 to $25,000 for the hits in cash in front of all the other enforcers in order to whet the appetites of all the enforcers. And in the safe houses, the offices that they have, there's a picture of Chapo Guzman on the wall. And it is said, and these guys know, that if you kill Chapo, you get $1 million a ranch, And so they go on all these missions in the United States and Mexico to kill anybody associated. Sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. But they get wind, they get an informant, they get information from a guy in Guadalajara that Chapo's going to be there for a quinceañera or a baptism, or but that was their playground at the time. Everybody went to Guadalajara. It was kind of a neutral zone. And the war was new at the time, so you either went to Sinaloa to kill people, or you went to Guadalajara to kill people, or you went up to LA or San Diego, So they go down, they send about 20 guys down to Guadalajara. They send about 10, 15 Logan guys that had just been there for about 5 months at the time, but they hadn't killed a lot of people. They send them down there, they put them in 2 houses, and they also subcontract a group from Los Mochis, Sinaloa, ISIS, or, just regular local guys, that Ramon. So you have 2 different enforcement groups in Guadalajara. You get 2 different radio frequencies, that's the way they work. They have a police type system using radios, even at that time. And, and back in 92, that was the turn of, that's when Mexican cartels started militarizing, building up security, going out, doing hits, taking sides. It was a polarization of the cartels. Whereas before they got along, now they're not anymore, and it continues to this day. But they go down there after about 10 days of doing patrols. They have a truck and they have these magnetic stickers like Pepsi Cola or Kentucky Fried Chicken they put on the truck, and they're all driving around and they're looking for Chapo. They never find him. After about 10 days, they're told by David Barone, who's the head of the group, Ramon Arellano, Kitty Paez, to go back to TJ. But, they didn't go back 10 at a time. They went back like 2 at a time. They were given money to get on the plane and go back to TJ. On the other frequency, they get information that Chapo's going to be at the airport, White Grand Marquis. So the group from Los Mochis gets that information. David Barone, his brother-in-law, get that information because they share the frequency for coordination purposes. The guys down below him don't know unless they have, they're told. But this was kind of a last minute thing. So as these gang members are filtering through the airport to get on the plane, the shootout happens, right? So you have the Los Mochis guys, you have David Barone. David Barone, I think, killed the partner, this Logan guy from San Diego. And so they unload on this White Grand Marquis. They think Chapo's in it. It's a Cardinal. So it was a big fucking, just a huge mistake. Mexico is, there's very little hope in Mexico, and religion is very important to them, and Catholicism especially. So to kill a saintly man like that was a huge mistake for the Arellanos. And, they got on the plane, they went back to TJ. The reports started coming in that they made a huge mistake. They went to a safe house. Ramon told everybody to scatter. A lot of them came here, back to San Diego. And one of the guys didn't make it on the plane. He was drunk. His name was Gory, Gorilla. And Gory was with a group of gang members. So as he's trying to get on the airplane, they won't let him in because he's drunk. He goes back to the bar. He passes some of the gang members saying, "We just killed Chapo. We just killed Chapo." Goes back to the bar, continues to drink, buys everybody around. "We just killed Chapo. We're going to be rich. I'm going to get a ranch, And so somebody drops a dime on him, and they take Gory, and they take him to Mexico City. They interrogate him, and they always get a confession in Mexico. And Gory basically says, I came on a plane with Goofy, Dopey Doc, Happy, Sleazy, Grumpy. I don't know their real names. I just know their names, but they're all from the Logan Heights neighborhood." And so that's when Operation Alliance, Larry's group, Jack's group, gets the information from Mexico that these are the names we're looking for. Jack comes to me, so we go to the San Diego PD, we match those monikers with the real names. Mexico has a provisional arrest warrant, so it's like a free-for-all. So from that point, you got the Larry Roberts, crazy Larry running around, arresting people, Jack Robertson arresting people. I'm busy at the time, but I'm knee deep in this because Jack had given me that portion of the case to get the enforcers to target the gang members. So all of a sudden it becomes national news, and it's a huge thing, right? And there's a war. The war has been solidified against Chapo and the Arellanos. Arellanos have to go into hiding. We end up kicking those guys across the fence, deporting them, extraditing them to Mexico, or just, I forgot the word for it, they're illegals, just push them across the fence.
Yeah.
And so we did that, all the guys. And so in Mexico, at the time, you're guilty to proven innocent. And so they did about 2 years in jail, and they got kicked loose. So at the time, I'm working full steam for Jack. We're doing a case against Logan Heights gang members in San Diego, and we're buying dope. We got the camera in the car. We got a guy dirty. He was looking at 11 years for being a deported alien. He started working as an informant for us. We put the camera in his car. He bought dope from a lot of gang members. When there's no dope to be sold, we would give money to get the guys drunk, to get them talking about what they did down south. So we have all this recordings of how they were trained and the hits that they did and how people got paid thousands of dollars and tactics and who was down there. And so we get all this really good intelligence, and we buy a lot of dope from about 40 gang members, Logan Heights gang members. And we go out and arrest them, and we get more informants, right? And a lot of them do time, we get more informants. But at the time I'm doing all this, we're doing this at I was in the Violent Crimes Task Force at the time. So it was a task force with DEA and the FBI as the two leaders, the main people. But our team, me and a couple of FBI agents and a San Diego PD guy, we were all targeting Logan Heights. And we had that active buy program. We had a warehouse down on the docks where we'd meet the informant every day and debrief him, put a tape in his recorder, give him money to buy dope, and then when he came back to debrief him, you know. So we had an elaborate operation set, and this guy went out and got us a lot of guys, got us a lot of information. We took a lot of guys down. And then in our surveillance, in our activity on the streets, I started seeing guys that we had deported or extradited to Mexico for the murder of the Cardinal. And I told Jack, I just had, Night Owl ID'd. I just had, this guy ID'd. Cougar, Cougar's back, And so he reports it to his U.S. attorney, who reports it to the U.S. attorney, Alan Burson. And Burson's pissed because in 1993, he stuck his neck out to extradite, to deport, to expel these guys that were involved with the murder of the Cardinal. And they were all getting released, and there was no communication between Mexico and the U.S. So Alan Burson's pissed. He tells Jack, we're going to do a case on those gang members that killed the Cardinal here in the United States, right? So Jack comes to me. He goes, hey, you got a big case? I go, Jack, I'm a probation officer, right? He goes, no, you can do it, Steve. I told you that you're going to do this part of the case. So you have to, you need to report to this U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney. So I start working with this assistant U.S. attorney, and she goes, I need 5 guys, Steve. I need 5 of the guys that were involved with Logan Heights that could tell us about the gang, that could tell us about being recruited, that could tell us about the Cardinal. So I go, yeah, there's a lot of guys I can go to, but some of them I don't want to give the opportunity. They're just too dangerous. But there are 5 guys locked up right now that are better risk than others. The first 5 guys, and at the time, I'm being schooled by the San Diego PD gang detectives too, right? And they always tell me, Steve, Mexican gang members aren't like black gang members. They're not going to give up their mother in a heartbeat. They're not going to cooperate. They're not going to cooperate. First 5 guys we go to cooperate. So, and they debrief extensively. They go to grand jury and debrief. They talk about growing up as a gang member in Logan Heights, selling PCP. And then in 1992, when the cell phones and the pagers come out, it's no longer selling drugs out of a park. It's more mobile, it's more suppressed, and more undercover. And then they talk about being recruited by David Barone and the Arianos to go down there and protect them in their day-to-day drug dealings, meetings, to go on missions to kill. And so we end up doing a historical case and indicting David Barone and 10 of the gang members that went down to Guadalajara to kill Chapo, but killed Cardinal. So our team and me as the lead agent are running that case. And it's big, and I have all the resources I need. And at the time, I had to find these guys that came back to the United States. So at the time, we would run their girlfriends. Girls are always the weak link. So we would run their girlfriends. We'd find out their addresses through their driver's licenses or whatever. And you got one up in Washington. I remember flying up to get him with Jack Robertson and the marshals and grabbing him up in some little town on the coast of Washington and say, you guys really must fucking hate me. I remember taking an MCC and he gets brought down here and he ends up getting 25 years. Ends up getting. And so we go to Augusta, Georgia, and get Cougar. That's a famous story, Cougar. Cougar was exhausted every resource of the juvenile justice system. I still have some of his dirty tests from PCP when my probation officer buddy was monitoring him. I had access to some of the records, so I know a lot about Cougar. After the murder of the Cardinal, Cougar came back to the United States, but he went up to Lompoc because his girlfriend had moved up there. So Jack runs his girlfriend, finds out she's in Lompoc, goes to her parents' house, said they're at church right now. So this is in June this is a month after the Cardinal was murdered. So Jack drives up to Lompoc. He goes to the church. He goes to the pew behind Cougar, and he whispers in his ears, Jesus, I'm here for you, and we're going to talk. He arrests him. In the 5-hour drive back to San Diego, Jack prays for Cougar, prays in tongues, does whatever he can to get him to tell him. Jack writes this report, and it's one of the most mind-blowing reports because you have on paper the DEA 12, FBI's 202, right?
Yeah,
DEA 6. So in a DEA 6 pages long, Jack and Cougar's conversation from Lompoc to San Diego. He's given up radio codes, frequencies, their code names, the codes that they use, the different crews, who's assigned to what, how much they get paid on Catholic holidays, $500 a week. They get trained by the military, the federal police, state police, local police. They have all these weapons. So that was an earth-shattering report, for DEA at the time. And it just kind of blew thinking, there's a war going on, and these guys are running their enforcement squads or their cartels like police organizations, dispatchers, radios, frequencies, and just very sophisticated communications. And so he gets Cougar to cooperate. But we end up extraditing Cougar and the guy we get up in Washington, Night Owl. Extradited, they get out, they come back. We find him again. I find Cougar in Augusta, find Night Owl up in Washington, and they agree to cooperate. Put him in prison, put him in jail, but they agree to cooperate. Cougar gets out of jail. Wait, no, Cougar never went to jail. He stays in Augusta. His wife's in the Army there. Cougar stays in Augusta. He goes to grand jury several times, and I'm his controlling agent. And one day he calls me, about a year after he starts cooperating. He goes, Steve, I want to become a cop. I'm going to this church, and all the guys want me to be a cop. And I go, Cougar, you can't do that. If they do a background on you that see that you graduated from kiddie prison at CYA, they see that you did 2 years for killing a cardinal in Mexico. They see that they're going to see that you were extradited for that. You can't do that. Come on, set your sights reasonably. You're a good kid. I know you're trying to do well. You've made some changes in your life, some great changes, and you definitely have great experiences, but it ain't going to happen. I get a call a year later from Cougar because I told him I wouldn't be a reference for him. A year later, I get a call. No, it's a Christmas card. Jesus thanking the entire team, Cougar, thanking the entire team for helping him, to guiding him, and that right now he's working for the Georgia Department of Corrections. He's a range master. He's
No bullshit.
Yes, he's an EMT instructor. And I'm reading the card because he sends it to Lee. He sends it to the most nurturing agent on the team. He sends a Christmas card to Lee. Lee gives it to me, and I go, oh, fuck. And I give it to Brick. And I say, Brick, we got to do something. Brick Johnson, he just retired from FBI. I go, Brick, and he was a solid dude, my FBI partner. And Brick goes, well, let me call the legal, they have their legal aid or their legal department at the FBI. They have their own attorneys. So he calls them and said, do we need to do anything? And they say, no. So we don't do anything. We let Cougar stay in Augusta and work in the prison. A year later, I get a call about watering my lawn, doing my curls. Now, when I was a working man, I would have to double task all the time. But anyways, I remember getting the call in my backyard. I'm watering the lawn, and it's Cougar. He goes, hey, Steve, how you doing? I go, fine. How you doing? How's your job? He goes, well, I quit. I go, why would you do that? He goes, well, I got a job with the Federal Bureau of Prisons here in California. And he goes, and guess what? He goes, yesterday when I was serving the guys in lockup their food, I ran into Night Owl and the other guy that that pled guilty for the murder of the Cardinal. And I served them, and they looked at me, and they didn't say anything, but Steve, they know that I'm a guard there. And they go, how are you a guard for the Federal Bureau of Prisons? They go, well, they hire you, and then you have, they do a background on you. So I know well about the 1 year probation period because I got fired because of my shitty traffic record. So and Cougar, again, he's been extradited. He's exhausted every resource in the juvenile justice system. There were articles written about him. The Cardinal and the gang was featured in a book, and he still gets hired by Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I remember going up there with my partner, Dave Herod. Dave and I went up there with the U.S. Attorney, Laura Duffy. We go up there. We have to get him ready for grand jury. But we're also going to talk to him about quitting his job because we've already dropped the dime on him. How do you hire somebody like this, right? So anyways, we go up there. Cougar goes, yeah, I got a talking to. I either have to resign or they're going to fire me. But if I let them fire me, I still get benefits for another month or something like that. And I go, Jesus, resign. Save face. I know you're trying to do well, but your past just precludes you from working for law enforcement. So he goes, okay. He ends up getting fired, making him fire him because he wants, So anyways, case goes on. Cougar gets fired. He gets a job with the Air Force, Vandenberg Air Force Base, with a top security clearance as a security guard.
What in the hell is going on?
Exactly. And I'm sending messages to Sebastian Rotella from the LA Times, saying, hey, this is a guy you did an article about 1993, they called the Cardinal and the Gang, and it features Cougar, and he has continued to get jobs in law enforcement with top security clearances, carrying a gun after his career. I go, do you want to write part 2 of this? He goes, no, but thanks for keeping me in the loop.
Holy
So
man, serious.
So I get a call from Brandenburg Air Force Base saying, hey, we got a guy here. There was a domestic dispute, him and his wife. He's a correctional officer. And he threatened her, and he works for us. We did a check on him, and we see that he was extradited, and there's a warrant out of Mexico for him for killing the Cardinal, right? And I go, yeah? Why'd you hire him? I go, this shit keeps happening. He goes, we didn't know. I go, well, guys don't do backgrounds. You got to do backgrounds. So they end up finding a way to get rid of him. And then, about 5 years ago, I get a call from his wife. Jesus kidnapped our kids, my kids, all 5 of them. So it's like we put out an Amber Alert, and he's an armed security guard up in Reno or wherever he's living at the time, carrying a firearm. And so I'm looking for him. We finally find him, and I send my agency. At the time, we had Jerry Brown and Kamala Harris working for us. So they totally turned our organization into one that targeted the worst of the worst to one that targeted bullshit crimes.
Yeah.
And our egos went from top notch to suicidal once they took over, because we were no longer doing the things that we hired on to do, protect society and make a difference.
And that was the Department of Justice.
That was California Department of Justice.
Yeah.
So when Jerry Brown and then Kamala came along, she didn't do anything to help. She just made things worse. She always tried to puff herself up, making promises to everybody. But our agency was just a skeleton of itself after Jerry Brown took office. And it continued that way under her realm as Attorney General. And so nobody in our department likes her. Nobody in California law enforcement likes her. She's terrible, and she's our vice president. But,
I'm going to ask you one last question, Steve. Just going to kind of wrap up the interview. Normally I ask 2, but I'm just going to ask you this one because you were dealing with, really the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Can you look back on, maybe even as a 12-year-old till now, how maybe it hasn't But has your attitude changed? Your views on people and how you see people in society changed at all?
When I was a kid, I was very suspicious of people. Didn't trust people because of how the environment I was raised in. Um, and over the years, it's maintained and only got stronger. I think I started, my friends used to make fun of me as a kid. They called me Victor Mature because I was very conservative. And there was an actor named Victor Mature. So we all from each other, but they called me Victor Mature. But I had this attitude that was conservative. I didn't like bullies. I didn't like drug addicts. I hated drug addicts. And sometimes I stuck my nose into things and got my ass kicked. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I did. But I was, I would say something. And to this day, I'm that guy that will say something. I went off on my supervisor twice in the last year. I saw him after 20 years after his retirement. But he was such a corrupt, morally and legally corrupt person. And he was allowed to get away with it. And because of him, I was taken off the case many times because he and my other boss were in bed with some of the crooks that I was working, getting favors from them. Not dealing dope, as far as I know, but getting favors for them, putting themselves in a compromising position. So I went into DOJ knowing that the top two guys in my agency were bad. And I brought the case with me that proved that they were bad, or proved that they were showing bad judgment, minimal bad judgment, but ended up occurring over and over again because they were compromised by some of the informants that I had, because they were, and it caused me to get pulled off the case many times. They threw everything they could to keep me distracted, so I maintain that same conservative attitude over the years, but in the job being conservative and being structured with people and holding them accountable, we've helped a lot of people, and having DEA at your back, DEA having your back to relocate people, the FBI too, to relocate people, to give them money, to provide those resources. A lot of the gangbangers that cooperated with us in this case, they're doing well. And I still keep in touch with them. And I have several that teach for me. I had a hitman that taught for me. I had a trafficker that still teaches for me. I have kidnap victims that I met along the way. Families that have been touched by murders time and time again by the RNs, that teach, that talk about their experiences. So I kind of bring that out because those are experiences that not a lot of people get. And when you're working a big case like that, you meet a lot of people, and I'm very inquisitive, and I can write well because I was a probation officer. They taught me that, and I went to Catholic schools, and so I was always in on the big debriefings. Whenever one of those guys got extradited, in our case, everybody got extradited, and everybody cooperated. And so you're sitting there across from the guy, and you're hearing about all the people he killed, corrupted, and boiled in acid, extorted, or people he paid off, and yeah, but my attitude, I was always listening, I was always respectful, but I hate those guys. I hate drug addicts, and I hate people that poison our society, and I hate drug users especially because they're fueling the problem. My little pothead cousin, we were camping last year, and we were sitting around the campfire, and he goes, Steve, I know what you do, and what is the worst part of the drug trade that you hate, that you think is the problem? Guys like you that just smoke dope all the time because it feels good. You're fueling the problem. There's a trail of blood behind you. You don't see it. You choose not to see it. You watch it on TV, maybe, but you're here in the United States insulated. But you're part of the problem. You and your stupid little friends that use dope and act stupid, and have bitch tits. I'm sorry. I do not like druggies.
You think?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Steve. Thank you so much for the interview. I really appreciate it.
But you know what? There were so many guys I just want to say this though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was given the opportunity to work a really cool case, and my DEA partners and FBI partners and U.S. Marshals and military, we were all a team. We were all on this, we were all on the same team, and we all treated each other well. I know the DEA and FBI always fought to be at the table first, but eventually I got a place at the table, and I was able to really learn, about the field that I was working and how about all the monsters in it, and how some of these people could have been really special had they chose the right path, but they were given every opportunity to get out of it, and they never did. But all those FBI, DEA agents, cops that I worked with from my agents, San Diego PD especially, we were all on the same team in the San Diego community. We kicked ass, and we did a really good job against the Ariano Felix organization, even though we weren't happy with the sentences that they received, because our U.S. Attorney's Office here is pretty weak. There are some really good, strong individuals, but there's a lot of weakness there. And so they never went to trial in any of the cases. The only time we got any closure on a cartel case was at the DA's office, when the U.S. Attorney's Office refused to take the case. We took it across the street, and those motherfuckers kicked ass. Yeah. And everybody got a life sentence. They arrested everybody. Everybody got a life sentence. We even went death penalty. It's the only time I was able to take the stand and talk about the Ariano Felix organization to a jury, to an audience. We never got to do that on the federal side. So all my FBI partners and DEA partners never got to do that. They never got that closure. And my friends like Dave Hara and Rosalinda Condi and Jack Robertson, they never got that closure. But I was taught by some of the best agents and backed by DEA and the FBI, who really supported our efforts for the most part.
Yeah.
Occasionally we had that bad supervisor, that weak link that wouldn't nurture the relationships all the way up, that would talk to Mexico, but it was a hell of a career. I have so many stories to tell, and I love talking about it. And, I've never left it. We had a cartel shooting 2 weeks ago in San Diego, and you don't have to record this if you don't want to, but it was this guy, in 2005, he went to his cousin's quinceañera in TJ. His cousin was a guy named Raul Silva Quintana, and Raul Silva was paying plaza to the Arianos to move his dope through their plaza. Well, he stopped paying them. And so at the time we were listening to their entire radio structure, and again, they ran it like a police department. And they always talk shit about this guy. Yeah, Silver, we're going to kill him. We're going to pay his check. It was always in code, but we know what this code means. We're going to pay his check. So the nephew, Christian, goes with the little girl that is helping me, giving me information. She was a beautiful girl that could get into any guy's pants, so she knew everybody. And she would give me their social media accounts. So anyway, she goes to this baptism with this guy, Christian. And at the end of the baptism, daughter leaves in a limo, 15-year-old. These group of hooded men come in, and they execute Silver Quintana right in front of my source. Right in front of him. She's a finger flying by her face, right? Christian jumps out the window. 19 years later, Christian's up in a high-end apartment complex in University Town City 2 weeks ago. He's driving in the complex with two very interesting people, but their names haven't come out yet, right? He gets executed. Guy walks up, boom, 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 like Son of Sam, and presses the traffic light, kills the two front passengers. There's a girl in the back. She leaves the scene, goes into the mall for 2 hours, comes back 2 hours later, asks a cop on the perimeter if she can get her purse out of the car, right? So anyways, Christian gets whacked. It's the same kid that 19 years ago jumped out the window to save his ass. But he's been, hiding here. A lot of people saying he's working with DEA, but I don't know. Nobody's going to tell me. DEA is in bad shape right now. Yeah. Especially in San Diego. And it's sad because everybody's morale is extremely low. They're afraid, paranoid. It's just evil at the top in San Diego, just, vengeful, just some vengeful stuff going on. It's really sad because I have people that are still working and they just want to get out of there. They'll go anywhere to get out of there. Yeah. And it's sad. But but I just wanted to say that it took a team effort. You know, I was so lucky to work with the right guys, but I put myself in that position to work with the right guys.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and who they were. You know, that Jack Robertson, man. Every time he came at me, dude, this is fucking fun stuff. And that's why I switched careers. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted to be a PO, but I saw that I could help more people and had more resources being a cop. You know, and working with DEA or working with the feds. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, but
Thanks, Steve.
yeah,
Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome. I could go on forever. See, you get me going.
Sure.
dude.